Greetings, I'm John Spirit. We've got a lot of plants to grow, and welcome to Factorio Pyanodons Supershorts. To make glassware for the Automation Science Pack, we need rubber stoppers, which requires latex, latex slabs, sodium alginate, which requires seaweed. Creamy latex requires sap. Meanwhile, the basic substrate needs moss, and cellulose, which comes from limestone. Let me see if there's anything else that requires the seaweed. Yes, agar requires seaweed. Since I'm only able to make 1.5 glassware per minute, I must make 7.5 basic substrate per minute. The reason I'm performing such precise calculations is last time I did this, one seaweed maker was not enough. But even though these calculations say I only need 1.065 seaweed machines, I'm going to triple it to like 3, just in case. It's only water anyway. To make this seaweed crop facility, we need limestone, which we can get using a soil extractor. To make sap, we need a sap extractor, which requires soil, which also comes from a soil extractor. To make sap trees, which are modules for the sap extractor, I'll explain more in a little bit, you need a botanical nursery, which requires glass. To that end, I'll make glass with this top section. I don't know why I didn't think to do that before. To get the sap seeds, I also need a botanical nursery. Moss comes from a moss farm, for which I also need soil. Lucky us, I've now got lots of it. 3 seaweed crop facilities, a moss farm, a sap extractor, and 2 botanical nurseries. Moss goes with incubated petri dishes, so let's start with that. We need a microorganism mine. The petri dish for this recipe requires an assembling machine in the middle here, so for now we will just craft it on our own. The tooltip when you place it on the moss farm says, all plants and animal buildings require 1 or more copies of the wanted item to function. So for moss, I need to have moss. Where am I to get moss? Rocks. They don't always give you moss, so I'm just going to look around for rocks until I find moss. You can get seaweed from oceans. Got my first moss. If you're wondering where I got the sap in my inventory, it comes from deconstructing trees. To make the moss, however, we need both water and carbon dioxide. Right now, we can only get carbon dioxide from coke in a high-pressure furnace. To extract coke from this chest, I may also end up extracting iron oxide, which is not preferable. To mitigate this, I will filter this splitter to take iron oxide out toward the bottom, and then I'm going to loop it back in to the chest. I feel like this is a bad idea. So instead, I'm going to route it into a chest of its own. Okay, now we've got coke making carbon dioxide, and that should go into the moss farm. I just need to give it water. Might as well hook up the seaweed crop facilities as well, since they need water. Water is also needed to produce steam for the agar, which requires seaweed. I'm really routing water kind of crazily. I've got water going into the boiler right here, and then underground pipes taking it in a mess over to the moss farm. So it is connected. Coke is being pulled down from where it's being pushed into the high pressure furnace to go into this boiler. It'll fuel the steam production. Water is now connected via an offshore pump to everything. This moss farm is steadily producing the moss that will accelerate it. 1/3 of this seaweed will go directly to the agar. And now with moss and incubated petri dishes, all we need for cellulose is wood and limestone. Since I can't automatically make wood, I'm just going to plop my wood into this high pressure furnace directly. And then limestone is being put into the cellulose. However, to make the basic substrate, you need to craft it in an assembling machine, which again we don't have yet. But right now we are producing everything we need for the basic substrate. However, it looks like the cellulose won't stack inside of the high pressure furnace, so I'm going to put it into a chest and limit it, although it's already limited by the fact that I have limited wood and can't farm it yet. Anyway, now for rubber stoppers, which first of all require coal, which I think I'm going to make another destructive distillation column for, since currently I'm literally using it all. I think I noted this raw coal production is sufficient for double this power output, so I'm not going to use it. In fact, I'll just use the burner mining drills for now and transport the raw coal in large numbers. I mean, I have all this in my inventory. The problem is dealing with the coal gas and tar, but I think I'm just going to void it. The tar I can't void without a sinkhole, which you get with steel processing. So for now, I'll just use the tailings pond, which will store a large amount of liquids, and I'll empty it every now and then, and the tailings pond will actually also vent gases. However, I can use the gas vent. Yes, I know, it's a huge waste. But I did these calculations, and I'm not really ready to recalculate for an extra destructive distillation column, especially when I won't be using the coal constantly. As before, I'll place down a furnace for the iron oxide with raw coal so that normal coal doesn't go into it. This tailings pond will accept the tar, and I'll just leave the coal in here until I get the assembler that I can put the coal into. Finally, these 2 chutes will take from the steel chest all of this raw coal and dump it directly into this destructive distillation column. Latex requires a pulp mill. Because my assembly machine is going to go right in this area, I'll put the latex pulp mill right here. It requires steam, which to me is a sign that it was a bad idea to put this boiler down here. But instead, I'll just pump water from the moss and pull it up into this boiler, and then use a splitter to pump coke into this boiler. Steam is now connected up. To make the latex slabs, we need yet another destructive distillation column with creamy latex, formic acid, and sodium alginate. Formic acid requires another destructive distillation column, and in this case, carbon dioxide. Oh no. Well, I'm pretty sure I have a surplus of carbon dioxide, a slight surplus, because this moss farm uses 7 carbon dioxide per second. To make use of it, I moved the moss farm down, and I'm turning this high pressure furnace, and I'm connecting the water up like this, and then pulling the carbon dioxide down like this, and then I'll be able to use it in the formic acid. To make the creamy latex requires a washer, and water, and sap, and limestone. To make sap really only requires sap trees in the module slot. To make sap trees we need sap seeds, which 10 sap are sufficient to produce. Oh no. Turns out I need 15 sap. Okay, now we got our sap tree going. I have an output priority on the splitter, so sap is going to go here first and fill up the washer, and once the washer is backstuffed with sap, I will have it go to create more sap trees. We'll set up the limestone once we set up the formic acid because the formic acid needs it. Or, well, the sodium alginate for the latex slab does, which puts a wrench in the way that I made this. Should be fine. The high pressure furnace fits quite conveniently, giving us space to run the pipe for the formic acid. The water is not so convenient. Stone I'll retrieve using a requester chest. I ended up moving the tailings pond to the right to make space for the roboport. To make limestone, I'm just adding another soil extractor, and a chute will pull out from the soil extractor and split the limestone into both directions. These 2 seaweed crop facilities will be dedicated to the sodium alginate, and now sodium alginate is being produced. Our final destructive distillation tower will make our formic acid, water hooked up neatly, and so does formic acid. We will supply the iron and the copper directly. And now, we have everything we need for the latex slabs, which will produce for us latex. As soon as I hook it up, to store the coal from the destructive distillation column, I'm actually going to let coal be put into this stone furnace. Latex I'm putting into a chest. Turns out the coal isn't staying in this furnace, oh well. I can now make rubber stoppers by handcrafting, and they will make me glassware. With the power of agar, I can make the incubated petri dishes, and once I get those, I'll be able to use the moss and limestone I just grabbed to make basic substrate. If this research center were not so large, I could fit it right here. Instead, I'll just put it down here and make my very first automation science packs, which I will promptly use to make automation science. Boom! Now I can make assembly machines, which apparently I already had in my inventory. Now I have petri dishes going into a chest for storage and then going into this assembling machine making actual petri dishes, which are now going in the microorganism mine automatically. And this assembling machine will take latex and coal, now I'm not plugging coal into this furnace, I'm just putting it directly in here, and make rubber stoppers which will make the glassware. I'll turn this chest into a passive provider chest, and put the basic substrate into a passive provider chest, and request using a requester chest. And now we are making automatic red science. Right now, the bottleneck in this process is that I don't have hot air to make more glassware. However, as soon as I get coal processing 1, I will be able to use a regenerative heat exchanger to get hot air from stone bricks and pressurized air. For now, steel processing, and then logistics, and we'll see what happens next. For now, that's it for today's episode. As always, if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. I hope you enjoyed, and God bless you all.